I married into the family that ruined my father. Now I'm their worst nightmare. That thought pulsed in my head as I stood under the rose-draped archway in the Archer family's private garden, hand in hand with Clara Archer, the youngest daughter of the man who had destroyed my father's life. Around us, guests smiled and clinked champagne glasses. String music floated in the air like perfume, delicate and practiced. Everything was perfect. Too perfect. That's how the Archers operated. Illusion over truth. Clara's eyes met mine, glowing with sincerity, and I forced a smile that looked real enough. She wore a gown that shimmered like a dream, her honey brown hair twisted into something elegant yet soft. She looked beautiful. Too beautiful for someone like me. But she loved me. And that was the point. I was the perfect son-in-law. Charming, stable, safe. I had worked for 2 years to earn their trust, and now I was standing at the altar of their empire. When the officiant finally said, "You may kiss the bride," I leaned in and kissed Clara softly, listening to the polite applause from the crowd. Every clap sounded like a ticking clock. My countdown had begun. The reception was held on the west lawn, beneath silk-draped canopies and chandeliers hung from oak trees. It was excessive, expensive, and thoroughly Archer. Even their joy had a budget and a PR angle. I circulated the party with Clara on my arm. People congratulated us, toasted to our future, complimented my taste in suits and wives. I played the part well, charming, grateful, humbled by love. Frank Archer gave a speech after dessert. Of course he did. He stood with his trademark presence, tailored navy suit, glass of scotch in hand, and that smile that never quite reached his eyes. To my daughter Clara, he said, and her new husband, Peter Quinn, a man who's impressed me in every way. He's sharp, thoughtful, and most importantly, he loves my daughter. What more could a father ask for? I raised my glass and nodded, as if honored. But inside, I burned. 10 years ago, Frank Archer drove my father's business into the ground, intentionally, surgically. He had poached our biggest client with an insider deal, leaked false financials to the bank, and forced a default. Within 6 months, my father was bankrupt, heartbroken, and dying of stress in a hospital bed. Frank sent a condolence card. No name, no signature, just a card. And now, I was married to his daughter. Shaking his hand, I excused myself from the crowd and made my way to the edge of the garden, near the pond. The sun was low, casting golden light over the water lilies. Clara joined me quietly, slipping her hand into mine. "Are you okay?" she asked. I turned to her, studied her face. The softness, the hope, the trust. She didn't deserve what was coming. That was the only complication in my plan. I hadn't expected to like her. To care. "Yeah," I said. "I'm just overwhelmed." "Me too," she whispered. "But in the best way." I nodded and kissed her forehead. She smiled and leaned into me. And in that moment, I almost forgot why I was here. Almost. That night, after the guests were gone and the last bottle of champagne had been popped, I sat alone in the guest wing of the Archer estate. Clara had gone to change out of her gown. I stared out the window, watching the moonlight hit the marble fountain her grandfather had imported from Italy. This family had built their empire on ambition, ruthlessness, and manipulation. And now, I was inside it. A wolf in their designer folded napkin den. They trusted me. Frank had invited me into the family business. Marjorie had called me a stabilizing influence. Justin, the smug bastard, had finally stopped looking at me like I was a stray dog. They had no idea I was here to dismantle everything they had. From the inside, I pulled out my phone and opened the encrypted folder I kept hidden even from myself. Files, names, dates. Weak spots in the Archer empire. Investments on shaky ground. Old lawsuits they thought had disappeared. My research wasn't just thorough, it was personal. The plan was already moving. Quietly. Elegantly. Just like their wedding. And Clara? She was the wild card I hadn't accounted for. The one piece of the puzzle that didn't quite fit with the rest of the rotten frame. I closed my phone and exhaled. This was the beginning of the end. For them. And I was ready. They say, revenge is a dish best served cold. But mine had been simmering for a decade, and every second of it burned. I was 19 when Frank Archer ruined my father. Our family owned a modest hardware chain, Quinn's Supply. It wasn't flashy, but it was honest work. My dad, Thomas Quinn, had built it from the ground up, brick by brick, relationship by relationship. He believed in shaking hands, in keeping promises, in paying people on time even when it hurt. He also believed people like Frank Archer played by the same rules. He was wrong. It started with whispers, competitors getting our inventory before we did, credit terms suddenly tightening, key suppliers restructuring. My dad thought it was bad luck. I remember him joking that maybe we'd walked under a collective ladder, but it wasn't luck. It was Frank. He'd acquired a silent stake in our largest supplier through one of his shell companies. Then, when the time was right, he squeezed us out. Made our deliveries late, prices rise, and quality drop. Meanwhile, Archer Industries swooped in with their own chain of luxury urban hardware boutiques. Our customers left in waves. The banks got nervous. Our line of credit was reevaluated, and then revoked. My dad tried everything. He mortgaged the house, fired good men he'd worked with for decades, worked 16-hour days, skipping meals and doctor's visits. He kept saying it was temporary. That hard work would fix it. I dropped out of college to help run the books and man the counter. I still remember the last receipt he printed, a refund for a broken wheelbarrow. The woman didn't even say thank you. 2 days later, he collapsed in the back office. By the time I got to the hospital, the doctors had stabilized him, but they weren't optimistic. The stroke had hit hard. He was paralyzed on his right side. His speech came out slurred. But I remember his eyes. They still burned, still fought. He asked me one thing, over and over. What did I do wrong? And I couldn't answer, because he didn't do anything wrong. He just trusted the wrong man. Frank Archer never sent flowers, never visited, never apologized. He did, however, buy the building that used to house our main store, turned it into a wine shop, called it Heritage Cellars. The irony wasn't lost on me. My father died 6 weeks later. The funeral was quiet. I held my mother's hand while she stared into nothing. After everyone left, I stood by the grave, hands clenched in my pockets, and made myself a promise. I would make Frank Archer remember who Thomas Quinn was, and I would do it by becoming everything he respected: powerful, polished, indispensable. I'd earn his trust, his money, his pride, and then I'd break him with it. Now, a decade later, I was watching Frank Archer laugh across a boardroom table, swirling a glass of his overpriced scotch like the king of a castle built on other people's bones. He didn't recognize me, not really. Not as the boy who used to help his dad unload pallets in the summer heat. Not as the kid who stood at his father's graveside, memorizing every detail of the man who destroyed him. To Frank, I was Peter Quinn, the self-made investor who'd climbed the corporate ladder with grace and brilliance. The man who had married his daughter. The man he now called the future of this family. It almost made me laugh. He liked to pontificate during meetings, told long-winded stories about strategy, loyalty, family legacy. Today was no different. I half listened, watching the way his hands gestured, the way his staff leaned in like he was some kind of oracle. He turned to me near the end and said, "Peter, I want you to take the lead on our next expansion. You've got vision, and this family needs vision." I smiled the way he liked. Measured, confident, obedient. It would be an honor. Inside, I felt sick. He thought he was passing me the torch, but I wasn't here to carry it. I was here to burn the whole house down. Every Thursday, the Archers held a family dinner. It wasn't optional. The dining room was long and echoing, with a glass chandelier that dripped light across the polished table like spilled diamonds. The walls were lined with oil portraits and rare wines. A fire burned even in summer. Ambiance, Frank said. Wealth had to feel warm. I took my seat beside Clara, who looked effortlessly elegant in soft blue silk. Across from me sat Justin, already swirling his wine like he was the sommelier of the damned. Frank presided at the head of the table like a Roman emperor, and Marjorie observed everything with the quiet precision of a chess master. I passed the breadbasket when prompted, laughed at Justin's half-baked jokes, even offered to carve the roast. I was everything they wanted me to be. Attentive, useful, discreet. "Peter," Marjorie said halfway through the meal, "those market insights you gave Justin were brilliant. He can't stop talking about them." I offered her a gracious smile, happy to help. "He's got good instincts. Just needed some outside perspective." Justin puffed up at the compliment like a vain rooster. "Told you he's sharp, Mom." Marjorie actually smiled. I think that counted as affection in Archer terms. Then the incident happened. The new server, a kid barely out of high school, fumbled while clearing a plate near Frank, and dropped a silver spoon onto the tablecloth. Just a tiny clang, barely noticeable, but the room went still. Frank set down his glass. "What's your name?" he asked. The boy straightened, pale. Mason, sir." Frank's voice stayed calm, almost fatherly. "Mason, do you know how much this tablecloth costs?" Mason swallowed. I'm sorry, sir. It's Egyptian cotton, hand-dyed in Naples," Frank said, still smiling. "Not something you can scrub with a towel and forget. Mistakes like this cost real money." Clara spoke before I could. "Dad, please," she said gently. "It was an accident. Let it go." Frank's smile didn't waver, but I saw the twitch in his jaw. "Clara, I appreciate your compassion, but this is a business household. We run on excellence." She turned to Mason. "It's okay. Really." Frank said nothing more, but I saw Mason disappear a few minutes later, not returning with the dessert tray. Just like that, gone. Disposable. Later that night, after the house quieted down and Clara went to bed, I stayed behind under the pretense of replying to emails. Instead, I made my way to Frank's office. The room was locked, of course, but I'd long since learned how to pop the old latch with a tension wrench. Inside, it smelled like leather, scotch, and expensive wood polish. I sat at his desk and opened his laptop. He hadn't even changed the password since last quarter. I plugged in a USB stick and copied a series of files I'd marked earlier. International transfers, shell corporations, private communications between Frank and several known fixers. He liked to cover his tracks, but not well enough. As the data transferred, I glanced at the framed photos on the desk. Clara as a child, riding a pony. Justin in a prep school blazer. Frank shaking hands with politicians. Not a single one included Marjorie, or Frank's own father. Legacy, it seemed, was strictly curated. When the download completed, I slipped the drive into my pocket and erased all trace of access. By the time I returned to the guest wing, Clara was asleep, curled around a pillow like a question mark. I watched her for a moment in the doorway. She had stood up for that boy tonight. And no one else had. She was not her father. That fact kept getting in the way of my revenge. The next morning, Frank invited me to his home office to talk strategy. He poured us both coffee from his silver carafe, and gestured for me to sit. "Justin has a pitch," he said. "Something high return. Risky. But if it pans out, it could triple our overseas portfolio." Justin swaggered in with a tablet and flashy grin. "Here's the play," he said, tapping the screen. "We reroute funds through a third-party LLC based in Dubai. On paper, we look like a passive investor. But the back-end deal guarantees us control of 3 logistics hubs in Eastern Europe." I raised an eyebrow. "That's creative." Frank chuckled. "That's what makes it exciting." I nodded slowly, careful not to reveal too much. I already knew this deal, and the shell company behind it. It had been involved in at least 2 laundering investigations in the past. Illegal? Maybe. Traceable? If done poorly. And that was Justin's specialty. Doing things poorly. I leaned back, thoughtful. "I'd like to study the risk model before we commit. Just due diligence." Frank grinned. "That's why I trust you, Peter. You think ahead." Justin rolled his eyes, but didn't argue. He was too used to being second best, and too arrogant to admit it bothered him. I left the room with a fresh copy of the pitch files on my phone. They thought I was playing for their team, but I was just rewriting the playbook. The kitchen was quiet at night, a rare kind of quiet. No staff, No phone calls. No staged conversations. Just Clara and me, 2 mugs of tea, and the hum of the fridge in the background. She sat across from me at the marble island in a worn college hoodie, legs curled up on the stool, hair loose from the elegant knots she wore around her family. This was the version of her that the world didn't see. The version I hadn't expected to like so much. "I couldn't sleep," she said, wrapping her hands around the mug. "That thing with Mason, it bothered me." I knew she meant the boy Frank humiliated at dinner. "He was just a kid," she continued. "One mistake, and my father treats him like trash." I said nothing at first, because what could I say? "That's who your father is, Clara. That he built his empire on broken backs and disappeared people?" Instead, I sipped my tea and let the silence stretch. Then she said something that caught me off guard. "You know," she began slowly, "I've always had this feeling that my father is hiding something. Not just about business, something deeper. Like there's this layer he won't let me see." I looked up. "Why do you think that?" She reached into the drawer by the fridge and pulled out an old shoebox. Inside were folded letters, yellowed with time and taped at the edges. She handed me one. "I found these last year," she said. "They're letters he wrote me when I was little. Before he got big." I unfolded the page. The handwriting was neat, purposeful. A younger Frank Archer, writing from hotel rooms and early boardrooms. "One day, Clara, I'll build something honest. Something you can be proud of. I want you to know that success doesn't have to come at someone else's expense." I read it twice. Clara gave a small, sad smile. It's like he wanted to believe it too. Back then, I handed the letter back. "People change, but do they have to change that much?" she asked genuinely. "I mean, can someone become so different they don't even remember who they used to be?" I didn't answer right away. My gut said yes. I'd seen it. I'd lived it. But sitting here with her, in this moment of honesty, something shifted. I had spent years painting the Archers in black and white. Predators and prey. Builders and destroyers. But Clara didn't fit either frame. She didn't want power. She wanted purpose. She wasn't blind. She just didn't know where to look. And worse, I was still lying to her. I had stolen files from her father's laptop. I had evidence that could start a dozen investigations. I had the tools to bury her entire family under the weight of their own corruption. And tonight was the night I'd planned to use them. But I didn't. For the first time since I started this mission, I hesitated. It wasn't weakness. It wasn't doubt. It was her. Because Clara wasn't guilty. And if I went through with everything, if I leaked what I had to the press or to regulators, she'd get hurt. Maybe not financially, but emotionally. She would lose the foundation she still believed in. And I wasn't ready to be the one who shattered that last part of her world. I stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights beyond the backyard hedge. Clara joined me a moment later, leaning against the counter beside me. "You've been quiet lately," she said softly. "I don't mean just tonight. I mean, for weeks." I nodded. "I've had a lot on my mind. Work stuff. Something like that." She reached for my hand, fingers gentle. "You can talk to me, Peter. I don't want to be one of those couples who keep secrets just because they're easier." God, the irony. "I know," I whispered. She leaned her head on my shoulder. "Do you think it's possible to rebuild something broken? Like, if a family lost its way, could it ever be good again?" I looked at her. Not just looked, I saw her. And in that moment, I wanted to believe it could. "Maybe," I said. "If someone inside that family wants it badly enough." She nodded, eyes closed, as if that answer gave her hope. And for now, that hope was something I couldn't take from her. Not yet. The Archer Corp boardroom was a cold box of glass and steel, all sharp angles and colder intentions. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a sweeping view of the skyline, but no one ever looked out. In this room, vision was measured in profit margins. I sat alone at the long conference table, waiting for the files to load. My encrypted drive blinked green. Complete transfer. I had them. Everything. Shell corporations, off-the-books bank accounts, real estate in the Caymans, payments to politicians, buried in consultancy fees. It wasn't just shady, it was prosecutable. Frank had spent decades building a fortress, but like all arrogant kings, he left the back door open. And I'd walked right through it. I could already see the headlines. Archer Empire under federal investigation. The stock would plummet. Clients would bail. Frank would be dragged through the mud he'd buried others in for years. And Justin? He'd be exposed as the idiot with too much ego and too little sense. I'd seen enough in these files to unravel every dirty thread he'd spun for Frank's approval. This was it. The moment I'd planned for since my father died. My hand hovered over the laptop, ready to send it all to a journalist I knew. Someone who owed me a favor. Another click would back it up to a legal contact, just in case. But then I saw it. One folder I hadn't noticed before, buried deep. Titled simply, Medchild. Curious, I opened it. And that's when the bottom dropped out. It wasn't offshore corruption. It wasn't bribes or laundering. It was a hospital, or specifically, a failing children's medical center on the south side of the city, a place on the verge of shutdown due to lack of funding. According to the reports, Archer Corp had funneled money into the property through one of their LLCs. Only this time, it wasn't a front. It was a lifeline. A detailed proposal showed a multi-year renovation, staffing plans, specialized oncology units, the whole thing. It looked sincere. And then I saw her name. Clara Quinn, personal investor. She had contributed nearly $400,000 of her own trust, rerouting the money quietly without asking her father. She believed in it, fought for it. This was her project. And it was tied, unfortunately, to one of the shell companies I was about to expose. If the story went public, everything would collapse, including the funding. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. This wasn't supposed to happen. Clara wasn't supposed to be involved. She wasn't supposed to care. She wasn't supposed to make this hard. But she had. She'd taken the tools of her father's empire and tried to do something good with them. And if I went through with this, children would suffer. Families would lose access to life-saving care. Not Archer clients. Real people. I sat in that room for over an hour, hands clenched, heart pounding like I was back at my dad's funeral, swearing vengeance through clenched teeth. I had waited so long for justice. But now it didn't feel like justice. It felt like punishment. And not just for the guilty. I closed the laptop without sending anything. That night, I took the long way home, driving without music, letting the silence drag my thoughts through every corner of my mind. When I walked in, Clara was curled up on the couch, barefoot, reading over grant reports. Her hair was in a messy bun, her glasses tilted, a red pen in her hand. She looked up and smiled. "You're late," she said. "Sorry," I replied. "Got caught up?" She patted the seat beside her. "Come look. We finally got approval for the new MRI unit. I didn't think it would go through." I sat down slowly, watching her explain line items and funding approvals with more passion than I'd ever seen from her family in a boardroom. She believed in this, and she had no idea how close I'd come to destroying it. I watched her talk, her hands moving as she explained each piece of the puzzle, and I felt something shift, not like a crash, but like a slow cracking in my own armor. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about choice. And for the first time since this all began, I chose her. The wine cellar of the Archer estate was carved into the foundation like a secret vault. Stone walls, oak barrels, the smell of age and power. It was the kind of place people escaped to when they wanted to feel untouchable. Or drunk. Justin was both. He stood near the far wall, cradling a glass of something French and expensive, slurring the end of a monologue that had started 20 minutes ago, and wandered through every boastful memory in his arsenal. "You know what your problem is, Pete?" He hiccuped, eyes bloodshot but bright. "You think you're better than this family." I didn't answer. I was only down here because Frank had gone to bed, and I needed a moment to think. I hadn't expected company, especially not this version of Justin. "You think you're smarter, cleaner, more noble." He waved the glass. "But you're here, aren't you, wearing the ring, taking the money, He stumbled toward me, laughing. "Let me tell you something about noble men. They die broke, they die forgotten." The words hit me harder than he knew. I crossed my arms. "You've had enough." "Oh, I've had enough all right," he snapped. "Enough of pretending we didn't earn every damn inch of this empire." I stared at him. "Is that what you call it?" He smirked. "You know what happened to your father, right? Everyone in the family tiptoes around it. But I remember. I was in the room when we made the call." I went still. Justin took another sip, like the moment wasn't shattering the air between us. He was weak, couldn't adapt. We gave him chances. Frank gave him chances. He was sentimental. And that's poison in business. "You destroyed him," I said quietly. Justin tilted his head, mockingly thoughtful. "No, we put him out of his misery. His books were bleeding, his model was outdated. It was like watching a dying animal. We just ended the struggle." I clenched my fists, fingers aching with restraint. "You didn't end anything," I growled. "You robbed a man who had built something real. Something honest." He laughed. "Honest doesn't scale, buddy. Your dad was a footnote. You should be thanking us. You wouldn't be where you are without that fire under you." My jaw tightened. I took one step forward, then another. I was close enough to see the smug glint in his eyes. One punch. That's all it would take. One satisfying, career-ending punch. But then I heard a sound behind me. Light. Delicate. Like a breath caught in someone's throat. I turned. Clara stood at the base of the cellar stairs, barefoot, in a robe, her hair falling around her shoulders. Her eyes were wide, and not with shock, with clarity. She had heard enough. "Clara," I said. She didn't speak. Not yet. Justin blinked, then grinned. "Well, this just got awkward." Clara stepped forward slowly, eyes locked on me. "Peter, what is he talking about?" I glanced at Justin, who was now quietly swirling his wine again, content with the damage. I opened my mouth, but no excuse came. No easy lie. Just the cold weight of everything I had kept from her pressing down on my chest. She looked at me the way you look at a stranger holding a familiar face. "I knew there was something," she said, voice shaking. "You were always kind, loving, but never open. I kept telling myself it was just who you were." "Clara, was it true?" she asked. "Did your father, did he?" I nodded. "And you knew? All this time?" Another nod. She looked down, as if bracing herself against something inside. "And you still married me?" The silence thickened. Justin raised his glass toward me like a toast. "Well, at least now we're all being honest." She turned and walked up the stairs. I didn't follow, because for the first time since I walked into the Archer world, I wasn't sure what the next move was. I had all the pieces. But suddenly, it felt like the board didn't matter anymore. The lake was quiet, almost unnaturally so. The kind of silence that made your own heartbeat sound like thunder. The sky was heavy with clouds, but the water remained still, reflecting the gray above like a mirror. Clara sat across from me in the small wooden boat, arms folded, eyes scanning the shoreline in the distance. She hadn't said much since we left the dock. I hadn't expected her to. This wasn't a romantic escape. This was an ending waiting to be spoken aloud. I took a breath, the kind that scraped on the way out. "There's something I need to tell you." She didn't look at me. "I figured. I should have told you sooner," I said. "But I was afraid." "Afraid of what? That I'd hate you? Or that I wouldn't?" Her voice was quiet, but sharp. Tired. I let the silence hang before answering. "Afraid that if I told you, I'd lose any chance of becoming someone real in your eyes." Now she did look at me, and her eyes were tired too, but not angry, not yet. I stared at the oars resting between us, like they were the only things anchoring me to the moment. Then I said it. "I married you because I wanted revenge." The words hit the water like a stone. No echo, just a ripple. "I knew who your father was," I continued. "I knew what he did to my dad. I came to your world with a plan, to get close, to gain his trust, and then tear him down from the inside." Clara didn't flinch, but I saw her shoulders rise slightly, like she'd braced for a wave that never came. "And me?" she asked, voice low. "You weren't part of the plan," I said. "At first." She gave a soft, broken laugh. "Not cruel, just tired. But I became part of it." I nodded. "And somewhere along the way, it stopped being a plan. I started seeing you. Not the Archer name, not Frank's daughter, just you." Her eyes shimmered, but no tears fell yet. "I didn't expect to fall in love with you," I said. "But I did. And that changed everything. You changed everything." Finally she spoke, calmly, but with a weight that cut deeper than shouting ever could. "You built our life on a lie. I know. And every moment, every smile, every night you held me. All of it started with a lie." "Yes. But you didn't go through with it. You had chances. I saw them." Her voice wavered. "You could have burned us all down. Why didn't you?" I looked at her, no longer hiding. "Because somewhere along the way, I stopped wanting revenge. I just wanted you." The tears came then, slow, silent. She didn't wipe them away. Just let them fall, one by one, like she'd been holding them in for years. "You should have told me the truth," she whispered. "Even if it broke us. You should have trusted me." "I didn't trust myself," I admitted. The boat rocked slightly as she stood, her silhouette framed against the dull gray sky. "You could have destroyed my life, Peter," she said. "But you didn't. And I keep asking myself, why?" "I think I was trying to prove something," I said. "To myself. To my father's memory. That I could finish what he couldn't." "And did you?" "No," I said. "But maybe that's a good thing." She nodded slowly, like she was still processing what all of this meant. For her, for us, for the ruins we were now standing in. "I need time," she said. "And space. I can't decide how I feel about you while standing in the wreckage of everything I believed in." "I understand." She looked down at me one last time, something unreadable in her eyes. Then she stepped off the boat onto the small dock as we drifted in. She didn't say goodbye. She didn't have to. I watched her walk away, barefoot on weathered wood, disappearing into the trees. And I sat in the boat a while longer, surrounded by silence and water, and the ghost of the man I used to be. The old warehouse on 14th and Hudson had once been a forgotten shell. Boarded windows, graffiti, rust creeping through the bricks. But now, it buzzed with life. Banners hung from the entrance, grand opening, Hope Point Children's Center. Volunteers moved in and out, hauling boxes of donated toys, medical supplies, food. Laughter echoed from inside, real, unpolished, and free. Not the scripted kind I was used to hearing at Archer events. I stood across the street, hands buried in my coat pockets. I hadn't been invited. I wasn't sure I was welcome. But I came anyway. Not to be seen, not to be forgiven, just to see what she'd built. A gust of spring wind kicked up around me, tugging at the edge of the flyer I'd folded into my jacket. Clara's name was at the bottom of the project list, Director of Vision and Community Outreach. I smiled despite myself. Of course that's what she was. She didn't inherit her father's thirst for domination. She'd rewritten the concept of legacy altogether. And I was proud of her. I crossed the street and stepped inside. The lobby smelled of fresh paint and possibility. Clean floors, warm colors, bookshelves stocked with children's stories. There were reading corners, activity stations, a quiet room for counseling, a state-of-the-art pediatric clinic tucked behind glass doors. It didn't look like a charity. It looked like a home. One of the volunteers recognized me and gave a polite smile, then hesitated, unsure, maybe, if I belonged here. I didn't blame her. But I wasn't here to reclaim anything. I walked toward the main hall, where Clara stood near a podium, speaking to a small crowd of local reporters and community members. She wore a simple white blouse, hair pulled back, eyes bright. Her voice was calm but strong, the kind of voice that made people listen without ever needing to shout. "We built Hope Point not to replace anything, but to create something new," she was saying. "This is a place for healing, for second chances. Not just for children, but for anyone willing to show up with open hands and an open heart." She glanced up, and our eyes met. For a moment the crowd blurred. The lights, the murmurs, the flowers, all of it disappeared. It was just her and me, and no one else. After the speech, she found me standing near the art display, finger paintings done by kids from the pilot program. One of them was a crooked sun with a stick figure beneath it labeled Miss Clara. She stopped a few feet away. "You came," she said quietly. "I shouldn't have just shown up. I know that." She shook her head. "You didn't come for attention. You didn't make it about you. That says more than any apology." I nodded, trying to find the right words, and failing. "I heard the board voted you out," she said gently. "I asked them to," I replied. "I signed over everything. My shares, my seat, my name." She blinked. "You walked away?" I didn't want any part of that world anymore. Not the lies, not the greed, not the legacy I thought I had to avenge. I donated my profits from the Archer projects, all of them, and I left. She looked at me for a long moment. "Why?" "Because I saw what real power looked like," I said. "And it wasn't numbers on a spreadsheet or press coverage. It was this, what you've built here. What you chose to do when you could have hidden or hardened." Clara's eyes filled, but she didn't cry. "You were part of the funding, weren't you?" she asked. "The anonymous grant?" I hesitated, then nodded. "I didn't want credit, just a chance to help." She stepped closer, her hands clasped in front of her. "I don't know what this is between us," she said softly. "I don't know if it can ever be what it was." "I don't either," I admitted. "But I'm willing to earn whatever version of it you'll let me fight for." She studied me. Really studied me. Not as an enemy. Not as a stranger. As someone she might believe in again. "I don't forgive easily," she whispered. "I'm not asking you to," I said. "I just want to keep showing up. However long it takes." A silence stretched between us, deep, but not empty. Then Clara reached for my hand. Warm, steady, real. "I don't know how to define us yet," she said. "But I know you're not the man you were. And I know you didn't destroy me when you could have." "No," I said. "I didn't." She leaned in, gently, carefully, and kissed me. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't fireworks or music swelling in the background. It was human, and honest, and everything I never thought I deserved. Later, as the sun slipped behind the buildings, I stood beside Clara in the courtyard of Hope Point, watching the kids run between chalk drawings and bubble stations. Laughter echoed again, and this time, I let it in. I didn't need vengeance anymore, not when I had love. Because in the end, love, real, broken, rebuilt love, was the only revolution that ever truly changed anything. And maybe, just maybe, I was finally free.